Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely devastating historical paradox. And honestly, it's one that might secretly be repeating itself in your own spiritual life right this very minute. We're going to unpack a pretty provocative concept, how absolutely mastering religious texts, literally knowing the chapters inside and out, can actually cause you to miss the very face those chapters are all about. We're looking at how modern religious systems might actually be creating distance from genuine spiritual encounters, rather than bringing us closer. It's a fascinating and, frankly, deeply challenging look at how we shift from personal relationship into performative institutional habits. So let's jump right in.
We begin our journey today with a very specific, incredibly weighty number, 929. Now, this isn't just some random statistic or a dry theological footnote, not at all. This number actually represents the weight of what's often described as the most devastating spiritual failure in all of human history. To really grasp why this number is so absolutely crucial, we have to look at what it actually contained, and, more importantly, who was carrying it.
So 929, that is the exact number of chapters in the Hebrew Scripture. You know, the Torah, the prophets, the writings. And the thing is, the first century Pharisees didn't just have a casual passing familiarity with these texts. No, they mastered them, they memorized them. They literally carried these 929 chapters in their bodies, in their minds, and in their mouths every single day. They defended these words with absolute laser-like precision and were entirely willing to die for them. We are talking about the most qualified, scripture-saturated people who have ever lived.
But here is the crazy paradox. Those exact same 929 chapters, they all pointed to one single subject, one face. The texts announced it in shadow, in prophecy, and in direct, unavoidable declaration. But when that face actually arrived and stood right there in front of them, breathing the same air, they completely missed it. In fact, it's worse than that. They used their brilliant mastery of those 929 chapters to construct a highly sophisticated theological case to reject and ultimately execute the very one their scriptures were completely about.
Our source material brilliantly defines this phenomenon as the wound of proximity. It's this tragic, heartbreaking reality that the most qualified people in the room can actually mistake the map for the country itself, or confuse the menu for the actual meal. You see, this wound doesn't open up in people who are miles away from God. It opens up in those closest to the text. It happens to those who substitute proximity to the words for a genuine, unmediated encounter with the author of those words.
Okay, let's fast forward and move to our next number to see how this plays out in our modern context. Today, the modern church hasn't just inherited those original chapters. We've added to them. We got 260 more chapters, the New Testament. These are the chapters that explicitly announce the arrival, the torn veil, and the wide-open throne of grace. So that brings our grand total to 1,189 chapters that explicitly, practically beg us to step into an unmediated, face-to-face encounter.
But what actually happened? Well, instead of stepping boldly into that unmediated encounter, we built a system. A system that is now a staggering 45,000 denominations strong. Think about that for a second. We took the very chapters that were meant to end managed access, and we went ahead and constructed thousands of new systems to manage it all over again. The chapter count grew, sure, but the fundamental human instinct of hiding, that didn't change one bit. When we actually sit down and compare the historical Pharisees to today's church, it is wild. We see the exact same performative institutional habits. The Pharisees built these elaborate fences around the Torah, right? These oral traditions that were completely designed to manage access and ensure strict compliance. And today, well, we build denominations. Both are essentially architectures of controlled distance. They're designed to give us just enough spiritual activity to feel safe and secure without ever requiring the total, terrifying surrender of a direct, undeniable encounter. The brilliance of the source text traces this hiding chronologically straight through history. It forms what we can call the millennial fig leaf. It literally starts all the way back in Eden, with humanity frantically stitching literal leaves together to avoid direct exposure to the divine. Then it moves to Sinai, where the Israelites are practically begging Moses to speak to them because they were just terrified of God's direct voice. Fast forward, it evolves into the Pharisaic fences, and finally right into our modern denominational systems. Guys, it's a 6,000-year history of humans desperately wanting a mediator, wanting a system, because a direct encounter is just too exposing.
Part 1. The Damascus Road. Breaking the system.
So how do we fix this? What is the model for breaking through these deeply ingrained, stubborn religious systems? Let's look at the Apostle Paul, who was then known as Saul. Talk about an absolutely incredible resume.
This guy had completely mastered the religious system of his day. He memorized all 929 chapters under the top teachers, and he was literally considered blameless under the law. Yet he used that exact mastery to violently hunt down the people who actually carried God's presence. He even stood right there holding everyone's coats, consenting to the death of Stephen, a man whose face literally shone with the very glory that Saul's precious scriptures promised.
But then, on the road to Damascus, everything changed in a flash. Saul wasn't convinced by some better, smarter theological argument. He wasn't invited to join a cooler denomination. No, he was thrown flat to the ground by a direct, shattering encounter with the living Jesus. A voice simply asked, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And in that single profound moment, his entire world completely collapsed. He realized the system he had built his whole life around had actually made him an enemy of the very God he claimed to serve.
After that intense, unmediated encounter, Paul evaluated his entire, flawless religious resume. And you know what he called it? The Greek word he used is skabala. To put it bluntly, it translates to refuse or dung. He looked at a perfectly crafted religious resume and literally called it garbage. Why? Well, not because the chapters themselves were bad, but because the system he built around them was actually a massive wall blocking him from a genuine relationship. The system itself was in the way.
Part 2. The Diagnostic. 8 Tests of the Modern Church.
So how do we audit our own spiritual habits? How do we see if we're a disciple of the system or a disciple of the encounter? While the text provides 8 specific diagnostic tests, let's highlight 3 absolutely crucial ones right now. First up, the silence test. If you just removed all your church services, your small groups, and your podcasts for 6 months, what would actually happen? Would your faith deepen in the quiet with God, or would it completely collapse? Second, the fruit test. Over decades inside a system, do you actually become more free, loving, and present? Or do you just become more defensive, tightly wound, and skilled at performing your religion? And third, the nakedness test. Are you truly known inside your community, flaws and all, or are you just busy performing a victorious spiritual resume? Ultimately, all of these tests boil down to one incredibly piercing, downright uncomfortable question that cuts right through all our religious routines. Ready for it? Have you met him, or have you just mastered the chapters about him? Seriously, are you substituting mere proximity to the description of the encounter for the encounter itself?
Part 3. The solution. Internal renovation. Moving away from the sheer exhaustion of the system and into a vibrant, living encounter requires a total internal renovation. And the most crucial point here is a massive shift in identity, from employee to family. You see, the system wants workers. It operates purely on transaction. You attend, you give, you serve, and boom, you earn your standing. But genuine encounter, that asks for surrender. It asks you to stop acting like a perpetually exhausted employee trying to earn a wage and start acting like a beloved son or daughter. It's exactly the difference between the elder son in the prodigal story, who fiercely demands recognition for his hard service, and the true child who simply rests easy in the Father's house.
Romans chapter 8 actually captures this shift perfectly. It says, "For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons." This beautifully illustrates that genuine encounter isn't some formal liturgical invocation you recite. No, it is the spirit of adoption spontaneously crying out, "Abba, Father," from the inside out. It's all about relationship over routine.
So how do we actually make this shift? We need to take some very concrete steps for this internal renovation starting today. First, stop filtering the texts into tasks. Just let them be invitations to meet. Second, sit in the uncomfortable silence and let God's actual presence fill it, rather than rushing to fill it with more religious programming. Third, lay yourself on the altar, surrender entirely. Fourth, remember that branches don't strain and sweat to produce fruit. They simply abide in the vine, and the fruit is just a natural overflow. And finally, step out from behind that fig leaf and allow yourself to be fully, truly known.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering thought. It's the exact same unyielding question God asked Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden right after they stitched those very first fig leaves together. It's a profound question that completely bypasses your denomination, your doctrinal correctness, and your impressive ministry resume. It's a question that lingers long after the 1,189 chapters are closed. Where are you?